There it is, everybody. Good evening. It is late night on the Gavin Show. What is going on with the comments section? I mean, okay, the internet's always kind of been the lowest common denominator of debate, but we're going to talk about that today. Let a few of you guys pop in there. You know, I've been seeing all this flag burning stuff and thinking, wow, that seems kind of weird. And then you go to the First Amendment and it says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, the Constitution's not God. It doesn't give us any rights. It's just some enumerated laws, and constitutions usually are founded on good ideas, and usually their basic articles are restrictions on government. The Bill of Rights being a fairly good example of that. And so I'm watching all these people today thinking like, well, good, they should be put in jail for burning the flag. I saw this video on Facebook today, and I was like, what? Looking at the comments of people on this and just thinking, okay, is this what we're doing now? And this is on the White House page, right? Saying actions have consequences because people are burning flags. And so these people are burning flags, U.S. flags, and the comments, of course, from the mob, they want justice, right? But you know what I said? Of course, no one wants to hear what I say. But I said, if burning the flag is banned, your leaders are traitors to the Constitution, and the flag must be burned. So light it up. A flag that's supposed to represent freedom has no value at all if people aren't willing to defend the freedom that it stands for. And I don't mean soldiers going overseas for oil and following orders. That's not defending freedom. Good to see you guys there in the live stream. DCJ, Omar, Mark, Janice. Tested. So I see all this propaganda, and I've been kind of looking at the comments, and I'll oftentimes leave comments on these. I'll rarely debate with people. I'll leave comments, and sometimes those comments turn into my posts, right? So something thoughtful will come to me, and I'll leave a comment about it. And sometimes I'll just spend all night doing that, and it gets everyone all riled up, and then I read their comments. But this is what's interesting. I just posted a video today. You can see it. I posted it as a short here on the channel. Actually, you know what? I'll just... I posted it to Facebook as well. Let me switch the audio over so we don't have feedback. No one likes that echo. And I'll just play you today's video. We are going to actually look at... I just really kind of wanted to do a video today on how we've gotten to a point where, well, truth is treason. But before we do that, I just wanted to pop in here for you guys and let's just look. Hello, Extra. Extra says is trying to gaslight. This is what they do. This is going to be our topic today because I don't have any real arguments. It's really weird to me that when literally everything I do is based on study and thought, and then people that do no study, no thought, and just repeat like robots what they're told, say that those who think are the unthinking. But just for context today, I posted this little video, which you can see on the channel.
On the channel because it goes deep. Just looking at these comments and people saying, oh, define due process. You think that because they're being deported, they have to have a jury trial? Everything these people have is being taken. Their kids taken from them, dragged out of their cars, dragged out of their homes, losing their businesses, losing their jobs, losing lives that they've literally built for their entire life. We're not talking about people that went up there to be gangbangers. We're talking about people that have been there for 40 years and have families and have worked and contributed to society. Now, even if you assume that these immigration restrictions are legal, which they're not under the Constitution, I talk about that all the time, you can go not just to the Fourth Amendment, which says that any person or thing being seized has to have a warrant. It can't just be arbitrary, but there's lots of other articles affirmed by the Founding Fathers that forbade any sort of restrictions. In fact, it's one of the reasons we fought the Revolution. It's in the Declaration of Independence. But then let's just go to Amendment 6. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial
jury. What a radical idea.
In the state and district wherein
What a radical
the crime
idea.
shall have been committed. Of course, it's not a crime to travel and work and live. That's a fascist concept. It never existed when the nation was founded. But here's the thing. Is it a crime or not? All these people say, oh, they're illegal. They're criminals. Okay, give them a trial by jury. And if they're not, let them go, because you're the criminal.
Now, I got thinking about this today. That's why the only reason I do like short videos, and I do them as long as I can usually, to try and get people to listen, you know, a little bit. If I make it short, maybe it'll help, right? But what's interesting is we always see this same thing, right? I'm going to change the title to one of the troll comments, because that's really the concept here. You'll notice even here in the chat with people like Extra, always playing the victim, right? Oh, they destroyed your argument, but it was censored, right? I've spent years making videos, making blog posts, being very public, laying out facts, reading the Constitution with you guys, but not just that, talking about where law itself comes from. There's a whole law category. I've been teaching law in here for years, and I don't mean the fake law that you have to study to be a member of the bar. I'm talking about law and what it is and what it actually says. And so when you have these people that have no ability to reason, they're just there to parrot and repeat, it's always, you know, you censored me, you hid my comment. I don't even know what Extra's talking about, by the way, but that's fine. Go write your own blog posts, right? Go make a video and rebut what I say. I'm not trying to censor you. And what's weird, if you take the immigration article, which I don't even usually get into that on each and every video, because it's very clearly established by the Founding Fathers and in the Constitution that all immigration restrictions of any kind are illegal. So number one, the federal government has zero authority over immigration of any kind whatsoever. No one can find anything to disprove that. And so what is their solution? And this is kind of what I want to make a topic about, if you will, today on today's show. I've been making these posts, and sometimes I admit they're a little bit inflammatory, but I want people to start using their brains, because we live in a society of unprecedented non-brain usage, it seems like. And so, for example, in this video that I posted, that you know, I do look a little crazy. I mean, it's okay, but I'm on the fly. I don't have a makeup person, right? But I was thinking about how everybody says, you know, on the one hand, they don't get a jury trial. And I'm sitting here and I go to the Sixth Amendment and it says in all criminal, first they said they're criminals. They should be deported. They're criminals. They should be in jail. They're criminals. They don't deserve rights. And then you go to the actual law, right? So they say you never have any arguments. You never have any debate. You're an idiot. Everything that statists do is gaslighting. And I guess it makes sense because we have politicians and presidents right now, and literally their entire MO is to gaslight people. Which ultimately comes down to saying people are crazy for using common sense, and you accuse them of all the craziness that you're actually doing. So they say, oh, they're criminals, they're criminals. And I go to Amendment 6 of the Constitution, and that's what I talked about in my short today. No person shall be held, on all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy, the accused, not the citizen, because there's no citizen. There was no citizens when they drafted the Constitution. It was before citizens. The Constitution has no relationship to citizens other than in certain rules, like to be president, things like that. Okay? shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury in the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed in the nature and cause and of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him and have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Everything we just described there, that is the Sixth Amendment, the highest law of the land that supersedes all state and federal laws that come after it, is completely being ignored in all immigration processes now. And people say, oh, well, they don't get due process, they're criminals. That's literally the point of the Sixth Amendment. If someone's accused of being a criminal, which of course it's not a real crime, that's why they don't get due process, because if you actually started putting people up for juries, first of all, their system of fascism would break down because they couldn't do enough trials. But second of all, people would stop convicting because they would realize that these people who are being witch hunted are not actually the worst of the worst. The worst of the worst are the ones sitting on the bench and running in the elections and sitting in the Oval Office. The people that are actually on trial are fathers and mothers and families and people who have worked all their lives and contributed to society all their lives. So if you think about this, it's so simple. And so what I get constantly, let's actually look at like the comments, for example, on this video. There's a few here. There's not a ton. Let's see if I can get the comments up. And just look at a few. Obviously, there's some people that get it, right? But this guy has so much energy, I'm exhausted by just listening. You can watch this video. I'll link it in the comments if you guys missed it. This is a manic serotonin dopamine imbalance. You notice what they do when they're gaslighting. They use big words and they try and act really intelligent. Ironically, I actually get this even on my photography channel when I'm teaching like concepts of how photography works, because I'm an expert in photography. I'm a master of photography. And it doesn't mean I'm not learning. One thing I learned from my mentor many years ago is that you never stop learning, even from people less experienced. But I'll get people that's internet mindset of ignorance, where you just spew out nonsense that uses big words and sounds intelligent and talks in circles, and then you say other people are idiots. And you notice that while I do sometimes call people idiots, I don't actually debate that way. I'm always presenting facts, and no one wants to respond to facts. And so what I see constantly, hey, stupid, they are here illegally. They have no rights. They are not born in the USA. The Constitution does not apply to them. So sick of the retarded shit you spew. Big shock. Military and a blue line flag, right? The state worshipers. Now, I want you to think about this. People are repeating this in mass. Millions of people are repeating that concept right there. They don't have rights. They're not citizens. Nowhere in the Constitution is that ever implied. Nowhere in even any case law, which isn't actually law, nowhere in any sense of human rights is that implied. Whether someone is a citizen has absolutely no relation on their rights, because the Bill of Rights is based on human rights. It doesn't grant rights. Okay? So now, and I could show so many of these kind of comments that are just constantly gaslighting all the time. Remind me where you studied law and where you passed the bar. Remind me where you studied law, because you're not even talking about the law. This is the problem. Like, lots of the founding fathers that helped to write the highest laws of our land and sign it didn't go to law school. Understanding law has no relation. Being a lawyer has no relation to whether you went to law school. Most of the attorneys I know that were on the bar, they don't represent the law at all. They might know laws, but usually they know the BS and how to manipulate it. And laws actually mean very little, these simple fundamental things. And yes, I recognize that sometimes it's because they know that those laws aren't relevant in court and they have to do what they can. I get that. But that's not law. So attorneys that are members of the bar, members of the club, they deal with statutes and talking in circles. But laws are actually very simple. And so what I see all the time, all day long, is these comments where we have constant gaslighting. So for example, the other night I said, if you support ICE, you would have turned in Anne Frank, you would have yelled to Pilate, crucify him, and you would have stacked the wood under Joan of Arc. Now, instead of taking the meaning, right? And yes, you could say, oh, you're being inflammatory. You bet. With these Gestapo statist redcoats, I'm not going to play games anymore. People are being destroyed. They're taking people away. This is what we learned about when we studied history as kids, and we said, how could the Germans have let that happen? That's where we've come to full circle again today. People are dying in these concentration camps that didn't commit crimes, because no, immigration is not a crime, even if you don't have papers. The very idea, and this was, remember, this concept that you need permission from government and papers to live and work and eat and survive and travel. Fascist regimes have tried to do this for a long time. But in United States culture and in any sort of a free republic-minded culture, this concept was not a real concept until recently. It's certain the founding fathers were very clear. The Declaration lists immigration restriction as one of the reasons we actually fought the American Revolution. And yeah, you can go read it. People say, oh, you're an idiot. And this is the problem that I see constantly. And you guys can see it if you follow my Facebook, my personal page, my Gavin Sign for Liberty page, the comments on here. You can always see this same thing, where some people get it. And some people, do you know who hates the United States like you? The Nazis and the commies, right? I support American women not getting raped, right? Everything, you weren't alive then. You were stupid. I got one. You would have killed Einstein for being a Jew. Just random, incoherent thoughts. Definitely incoherent and definitely random, because, while I don't support the terrorism that the current Israeli regime has committed, that has no relation to whether I'm against somebody that's Jewish. See, everything is reversed and twisted all day, every day. In fact, you can look at some of these. I mean, if you look at some of these comments that we get all the time. Let me clear out some of the junk here. I mean, it's not your Constitution anymore. This is their debate, guys. This is what I want you to understand. This is what I get all day, and I'm making these thoughtful posts and videos and trying to articulate. Stay in Mexico and mind your own business, all right? The groomer speaks again. This is gaslighting at its finest. The people currently in power, and I'm not saying that the previous administration wasn't involved either, but these are people that are literally on the pedo list. These people are rabidly supporting and then turning around and calling other people pedos and groomers. The rationale of this is honestly beyond sensibility. Once again, you have proven conclusively that you are a completely deranged lunatic who is so out of touch with reality that you believe in your own bizarre lies and delusions. You're a sick man and you really need to get professional help. That's this lovely comment from Tracy. I get this all day, every time I actually sit down and reason something out. And this is my question and kind of the topic of this video, because I could go through and show all kinds of these. You ran to Mexico. You're a coward. I think you might be low on testosterone. You're so effing retarded. These are the debates. See, when I was young, I remember if you had an opinion on something, you wrote a letter to the editor, and providing it was reasonably well crafted and not incoherent stupidity, it would get published in the paper relatively freely. And so we could have a discourse that way in public before social media. Somehow we've gotten to this point where these people that claim to be mature, elders, Christians, wise, veterans, whatever, the stuff coming out of their mouth, here I am still writing letters to the editor. It's just you guys are the editor. Here I am researching and reading constitutions. That article, I realized a long time ago that the immigration restriction was BS. But this article that I link all the time, that's all my notes and all the reasons why the founding fathers were against immigration restrictions, why they made it clear that they were not permissible, and also all the things around it in the Constitution, human rights, and just the basic moral law of life, liberty, and property. It's all in this article. But I didn't just throw it together. I didn't just let AI write it all. And I certainly didn't just say, you guys are all idiots because you don't believe like I do. And I realize the left and the right does this. This is where we're at. Intelligence and thoughtfulness is now called ignorance and stupidity. And raging, foaming at the mouth, hate and stupidity is now called intelligence. And that's ridiculous. And this article here, I always leave this, right? Because I'm not going to go repeat. This literally is more than 5 years of research, all in one place. You can go find every quote, every reference, every argument that says the government has power to control who immigrates and who doesn't and who works and who doesn't, and immigration and papers and all that are needed. Every argument is debunked in this argument, in this paper, right? Now you can go there and you can disagree, but if your rebuttal to that is you're an idiot, then you lost. Everybody's always saying, Gavin, you lost the argument, but they can't even make a response to me. And this is what I'm getting at. What has happened to our society that this is the case? And I make comments like that short video I did today where I'm sharing my thoughts, and the kind of comments on say things like, building on a life of crime you committed doesn't make you noble or absolve you of anything just because you committed a crime long ago. Justice delayed isn't justice. Referring to someone who came to the U.S. without papers 40 years ago and has been working and raising a family and contributing to society all their life. Do you realize how psychotic that is? That is mentally ill. That's not a life of crime you committed. When you go back to the 80s and 90s, no one cared, including the conservative Christian right, that they didn't have papers, because we all knew that was ridiculous. It's actually been, I recognize that some of these rules have existed and started slowly after the Civil War. Before that, absolutely no immigration restrictions of any kind existed. Borders were always open in the U.S. That was the demand of the Constitution. That was the intent of the Founding Fathers. Now, after the Civil War, that slowly changed, but it mostly didn't get heavy until the drug war in the 70s and 80s. And ultimately, even then, compared to now, it was nothing. It didn't really ramp up until after 9/11 when they tried to make everyone a terrorist that wasn't like us. It's gaslighting. They're always gaslighting. And so what's actually happening? What are immigration restrictions? Immigration restrictions are when the biggest criminals and human traffickers in your nation get together to convince you that they will stop crime and human trafficking. And the only price you have to pay is to give up some essential liberties for security. The Founding Fathers also talked about that those who give up liberty for security deserve neither. And they won't have them either. And that's what we have today. We have war, we have lies, everyone's a terrorist, everyone's invading your family. The government is going out and creating the crime and insecurity and making you afraid and angry. They use war to do the same thing. War is a drug. It exists to save you from problems created by the very people declaring the war so that they can steal from your country in many ways, but one of the big ones being by paying their corporate friends 20, 50, 100x the normal rate for basic items like a Band-Aid or a shell or something like that, and they get a kickback, all while causing fear and rage in you, and then they offer you the solution, give up your freedom for more security. It's this endless cycle that we're in that's almost like a time loop. And people are so ignorant because no one will even have a reasoned conversation. You have to understand that if you can't sit down and defend your position with some kind of facts, and facts are not what your favorite talk show host or the news or the latest nationalist propaganda. Facts are history. Facts have to coincide with what law is, life, liberty, and property. Facts have to coincide with the way things work. These so-called right-wing conservative Christians are no more rational than someone saying a cow is a pig or black is white, or a man who declares himself a woman is suddenly changed genders. That's not how it works. there's many magical mysteries in the universe, but there's certain things in the world we live in that have to be based on fact. And you can't just call everyone an idiot and then say you won the argument. And I don't know when these people got to this point where we're such raging, rabid, stupid bitches that we just repeat what they say. Executive orders are not laws. Legislation are not laws unless they comply with the higher laws, the fundamentals of law, oftentimes in a civil sense, usually enforced through a constitution. The Constitution forbids everything they're doing. And so they say, oh, well, no, they're criminals. They're criminals. You built a life of crime. No, they're not criminals. When they came, a lot of these people that are being deported, when they came, no one even cared. We all laughed at these rules. And suddenly now they're terrorists after they've been paying taxes and contributing. It's BS. Give them a jury trial. And this is what it comes down to. This was my case in point, and I'll close this kind of topic that I mentioned in the short video. If they're criminals, give them a jury trial. You insist they're criminals, give them a jury. Oh no, well no, it's a civil matter, right? They don't get a jury trial, they just get sent out. This isn't a traffic ticket. They're not being fined $100. They're having everything they have taken. Their families are being taken away. They're being sent to concentration camps or prison camps, if you prefer. They're losing their jobs, their homes, their possessions, their cars. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure, not citizens, people, in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. I'm literally reading the law and people are saying I'm a psychotic, hopped up, crazy person. They're the crazy ones. Truth is treason in an empire of lies, and we live in an empire of lies. So you have to decide, because if there's no warrant, if there's no probable cause, well, they can't be detained, searched anyhow. They certainly can't have their things and their entire life and everything that they've worked for stolen from them, which is what's happening right now. And so therefore, if you do have a warrant, because the Constitution doesn't give the government the authority over this, so if there is a warrant, oh, you don't have papers, you didn't follow our legislation, where's the warrant and where's the jury trial? Because that's demanded in the sixth. Has anyone arguing with me ever actually sat down and spent 20 minutes just reading the Bill of Rights and the rest of the Constitution? Has anyone actually stopped and used a brain cell in 2025 that's supporting this psychotic Gestapo-like fascism? Because I have. And I've been doing it for years, and I've been trying to convince you guys of it for years. Please, if you're falling for this crap, just stop and get off the news and get off the talk shows and go read the basics of how Christ tells us to treat people, of what the Constitution says. That's the law. I'm getting called mentally ill for quite literally reading the law. And that's the country we live in. And I just want to know, at what point did that happen? Okay, well, there's another video that I'll cut out and post, and that the algorithm won't care about because that's what we do, but someday it will matter, even if I'm not here anymore, because the law matters. The law matters. And there's nothing unreasonable. And yes, did the Founding Fathers want 20 million Spanish settlers in South Carolina? That's what James says, okay? So this is the kind of things they say. It's always gaslighting rhetoric, right? That literally takes moments. And let's just stop. Let's just stop and look at this comment, okay? James says in the chat, did the Founding Fathers want 20 million Spanish settlers in South Carolina? Now, how much brain cells do you have to use? You have to know that you're just gaslighting people. But people fall for this, just like they fall for this AI nonsense and thinking these videos are real, right? No one's talking about Spanish. Spain is a country over there. Mexico, throughout the Spanish rule in their own revolution, many years ago. And so I think what James means to say is Latino settlers. Do you know the population of South Carolina? 5.5 million. It took me in stride 7 seconds to figure out the population of South Carolina while talking live to all of you. So 20 million Spanish settlers are certainly not on their way to South Carolina. They never were. And yes, the Founding Fathers absolutely wanted everybody who wanted to come in freely. That's why they demanded and made it the law that immigration could not be restricted. And that's why literally in the Declaration of Independence, it says in one of the listed reasons that they were going to war against the king is that he restricted immigration to the colonies. You have to be willingly ignorant and evil to support this, because you keep repeating these gaslighting propaganda arguments in your mind while you're literally watching families being torn apart. So you have the right, and they say, oh, we believe in acting like Jesus. We believe in the family. While they're doing everything they can to destroy the family, to destroy hardworking people. And for what? Oh, they're a criminal. Really? So if they're a criminal, give them the due process. Oh, well, it's a civil matter. They don't get to. If it's a civil matter, you can't take their stuff. You can't detain them. Is it a civil matter or is it a criminal matter? Decide, assholes, because you can't have it both ways. If it's a crime, if you're claiming it's a crime, you have to give a trial by jury of their peers and prove that it's actually a crime, which you can't do because it's not in the law and all your rules are fake. If it's not a crime, well, okay. You could say, well, we have a rule that you have to have papers and you don't, so here's a $200 ticket. Well, you're still an extortioner, but at least you haven't ruined their lives, and then they can fight that in the way they want. So is it a civil matter or is it a crime? You kind of got to decide, right? This is the problem with gaslighting, hypocritical Satan worshipers that call themselves freedom lovers. They're not freedom lovers. They're the enemies of the Constitution. They're the enemies of America. They are sworn enemies to freedom. And it hasn't always been this way. A lot of these people were converted through the propaganda of these psychotic gaslighters like Donald Trump, who I told you in 2016, even though I said, look, I get that the other guy's not a good choice, but Trump's not going to save you either. So don't fall for it. And they didn't listen. A lot of these people that now are full-on redcoat fascists, in the past, I stood beside, standing for their gun rights, standing for their land rights, standing for the Constitution that they said they supported, but for them it only applied to the people they liked, not the people that they hated. The actual laws governing immigration in the United States says honk. Is the problem with people that just honk. They never know how to whisper, and they never know how to read. Are found in the Immigration and Nationality Act, which was first enacted in 1952. Again, much like saying all guns are now illegal, that's how much authority the immigration. So if something is unconstitutional, like the Immigration and Nationality Act, the federal government is not granted any authority in the Constitution to do that. Now, we might say, well, why not? I mean, they got to be able to do something. No, they don't. That's why we have a Constitution. In fact, shall we go on, if we must, because no one's ever read it apparently. I know some of you have. Not picking on everyone here. Let's go to a few other amendments. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively or the people, which follows the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So the people's rights are first, and then the states' rights and the people within it supersede the federal if 10th Amendment, U.S. Constitution, the law, if it's not granted in here. Nowhere in the Constitution, in any fashion whatsoever, is any authority granted over immigration control, ever. And the Founding Fathers were quite clear when this was written that that was the case. Again, all of this debunked in the article that I frequently share so that I don't have to keep repeating myself. And yet it seems like we have to keep repeating ourselves. So you have, again, these gaslighting Nazis. What did the Nazis say? Oh, it's the law. You have to follow the law. If you hide people we're looking for, not just Jews, guys. If you hide the people we're hunting, you're a criminal, right? You'll be punished too. It's the law. We're a nation of laws. There's one the fascists have been building for years for the dumb of mind. Okay, we're a nation of laws. And yet, this is the irony of that gaslighting. I can literally be sitting here talking about the law, backing up everything I'm saying with actual law, not just the concepts of human rights, which are relevant, and those actually supersede constitutions, but with the actual constitution of the country. And people are saying, oh, but the Immigration and Nationality Act, you have to follow the law. It's literally an invalid law because the Constitution says it's not an authority of the federal government. So the Immigration and Nationality Act has no more validity than if the government tomorrow and the Congress passes a law that all firearms are banned. Why? Because the Second Amendment says they can't do it. And I keep having to repeat it. And I feel like even though I get frustrated, I'm very patient repeating it. But the truth is, these people that hate freedom, that hate their neighbor, that hate the Constitution, and that are the enemies of America, and I don't just mean the United States, of the entire continent. They are the enemies of the continent, and they need to be called out. People like Honk, notice they never use their real names, because these people do not want to be connected to their names for the crimes that they're committing, because they are committing crimes. They are inciting violence and deprivation of rights under color of law in mass against millions of people. These people are complicit in crimes, and they will be called out, and eventually they're going to be judged for it. And the ones that participated in it, like the ICE agents, eventually will probably be sitting where the Nazis were after the war for their abuses. Some of them, right? So there's levels. There's levels, right? But here's the thing. People always say we're a nation of law. If we're a nation of laws, follow the law. They're always going to try and flip it. The only arguments people ever make to me on this are literally just flipping reality and gaslighting. So if I say the law says you can't restrict immigration, you can't take away people's rights without a warrant, and you can't punish people and take away their things without a jury trial, right? That's the law. Very simple. I didn't invent it. What do they come back and say? The Immigration and Nationality Act says that those are the immigration rules, and it's a civil matter. It's not actually a criminal matter. And I say, well, wait a minute, then that's not legal. Oh, they're criminals. Literally with one, they'll end one sentence and start another, and it'll be completely contradictory. So it's not just stupidity. I mean, I know the people are falling for this because they're very ignorant, small-minded children that have never learned to do critical thinking. But I don't think it's just that. I think they're so full of hate and making others suffer, making others feel worse than them, makes them feel better about their own petty, sinful, pathetic selves. And that's why they promote this. And the United States is king of that. We're king of egoism. It's fine to have pride in your national product, what you know, your skills. But egoism is different. You look at Texas. They crow louder than any other state about their freedom. And yet, if you go to Texas, every guy that's crowing about their freedom there and saying Texas is the greatest has the government's DICK so far down their throat they can't even speak clearly. I'm not actually making fun of their accent. That doesn't bother me. Again, all of this stuff, right? Birthright citizenship absolutely is real. And why wouldn't it be? The idea that if someone has a kid in a country, that it's the kid's fault that the people didn't come without papers, which they shouldn't have to, by the way. But let's say that you say that that's not permitted. That has nothing to do with the kid. The idea that a kid can be raised in a country It's the only country they've ever known, the only language they speak, and now they're 30 years old, and you can deport them to another country when they've committed no crime. There's no due process. They were born in that country. You have to realize that if you believe that, it's not even about the fact that, yes, the Constitution is clear. Yes, I covered this in the article that I always link because the Founding Fathers were also clear that birthright citizenship was a real thing and was how it worked, and everything else is just gaslighting. But even if it wasn't written in the Constitution and by the people that wrote it, to believe that that 25-now-year-old kid that literally lived his entire life in the United States because his parents didn't get the right permission slip from government, you have to be mentally ill. You have to truly believe in statism at such a profound level to even say that out loud. That those people should be deported, that we're literally deporting people to countries they've never been to. They don't even speak the language. They don't know the culture. You guys have no idea. Anyone who supports this is a psychopath. They're a criminal. And I mean that. I mean, I realize there's levels of crime, right? But by enabling this, by permitting this, by tolerating this, their silence is not just consent. They're actively supporting it. And so it doesn't matter what they say. You notice how Honk cannot make a rational argument to save his life. He couldn't take any of the points that I've made tonight and make a video on them that was coherent. He can't go to the article and make a comment that actually debunks anything I've said. They just say, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you're a traitor, you're a coward. I hear like 5 times a day that I'm a coward because I went to Mexico so I can speak freely and didn't end up in the prison. And here I am continuing to speak for the people of my country and others 6, 7 years later, and they're still calling me a coward. And that's fine. Call me a coward. The idea that you have to beg for permission, quite literally, to live, to work, and to feed your family. If you believe that, you have Stockholm syndrome, or you're just downright evil. One of the two. It has to be one of the two. Because the level of ignorance it takes to believe that is truly astounding. But we live in a society that truly does believe that. And frankly, both sides believe that, the left and the right, in different ways. While the left right now, ironically, is far more constitutional than the right, in the past, it was reversed when we were talking about ranchers' rights and gun rights and stuff like that. They've got all of us turned against each other in ignorance and hate. And this is why I don't hate any of these people that are hating on me. I'm just astounded that when I grew up in an era where kids went to debate school and there was a debate team and you had letters to the editor, and part of your schooling was you had to articulate concepts and debates. And we live in a society that just rails on people, and if you speak intelligently or with facts or against corruption, they simply start screaming like 2-year-olds and saying you're an idiot and saying that you're mentally ill, that you need professional. Like there's no ability, like in the comments I showed you today, there's no coherent ability. It's like their brains have been damaged. And I know that videos and social media, and especially things like TikTok, this has been just coming out in recent years now that yes, this is actually causing profound brain damage to people, that their neural circuits are not working well. So we literally are being reprogrammed. But still, like, I lived through it, and a lot of you did too, and we can still sit here, some of us at least, and still have a rational conversation. Truth is treason in the empire of lies. And so when people are just raging like this, and I even look at the comments of this chat, like it's funny to watch how the fascists will do it. Because, they'll try and find something to kind of be on your side. Then they'll flip on you, and then they'll flip back the other way. Then they'll try and be your friend. Then they're your enemy. Then you're an idiot. Then you're a libtard. There's no ability to have a rational argument. And you notice the people, the naysayers in here, there's no rational arguments. They've never actually studied this. They're just repeating what they've been told. And so here I am, and I've spent years. I've spent enough time studying law that if we had a real legal system, I would be considered an attorney on matters of human rights and the Constitution. But we don't. And okay, that's fine. You can say that I'm an idiot, and where did I study law? I studied law by actually sitting down and studying the law and reading history and learning what law means and what it is and what it's based on and what it actually says, instead of just repeating what I heard from a politician. That's why I'm qualified, because I actually know it. Because I'm actually a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a barred attorney. I'm an actual lawyer because I've actually learned the law, and not just some words, but the principles of it, which are far more important. And this is what I found that most of the attorneys that I've debated with over the years completely lack. So no, I'm not going to come in and try and be all humble. I know this stuff. I have studied this stuff. I have beaten my head against the wall trying to make it simple, which was the intent of the Founding Fathers in the Constitution. I'm not saying that a lot of the Founding Fathers weren't assholes too, and elitist at times, but what they were trying to make was something that was simple and straight to the point and understandable by the common man. It doesn't matter to me if the raging lunatics who can't even form a coherent debate tell me, Gavin, you're not a lawyer, you didn't study law, you have no validity, because I'm sitting here telling you the law and you can't make an argument, and the lawyers can't even make an argument. I would debate any attorney on this, all the way to the highest levels of government. And all they would do is the same thing. They would be better at gaslighting and trying to make me look dumb, but it wouldn't work because it's not in the law. It's simply not there because it's not law. You see how they're doing this? Do you see what they've done to reason? We have a society now that has no reason. And I hope that those of you in here are seeing this. I actually enjoy it when a few of these trolls come in here, because maybe these people will realize at some point that they're the psychopaths, that they're actually the ones that have a real problem. You have to stop letting people make it crazy. The things I talk about on this channel are fundamentals. They just go against what the lynch mob it tells you to believe. They're not crazy. It's the mob that's crazy, and always has been. Here's one. We can't have a nation without a secure border. Okay? Was that a question? Was that law? No, that's just rhetoric. That has absolutely no relation. What did Franklin say? If you give up security, if you give up liberty for security, you deserve neither and you won't get it. He was talking to Dehar Master, right? Dehar Master thinks it's okay to ignore the law while simultaneously saying we're a nation of laws, they broke the law, they're criminals, while simultaneously saying I want freedom, while simultaneously saying I don't want freedom for those guys, they're brown. They're probably terrorists. It's the height of stupidity and arrogance. Because on the one hand, you're so arrogant that you think that you can just invent some rhetoric and it just completely erases all law, all common sense, and all reality, because you can't have a nation without a secure border. At any point in this, was I saying that you couldn't stop an invading army that was coming to conquer your land? No, that's a secure border. A secure border is not and never was the restriction of the individual person. That's Berlin, Germany. That's the Great Wall of China, keeping their people in. Okay, walls are to keep the slaves in, not to keep the criminals out, because the criminals have the power to climb over and, more realistically, to come in on a plane with the president of your country. Are you not understanding this concept? We're so left and right biased that we're not even understanding the basic concepts. The Founding Fathers said anyone can come here. No one was stupid enough at the time to say, oh, well, if anyone can come here, we don't have a nation. That's not reason. That's just repeating rhetoric that you'd heard on a talk show, that you heard your dumbass president say. It's just gaslighting. That's not a debate. And this is the problem. People have no ability to debate. You don't have a right to keep people out. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist here. The Founding Fathers were clear it doesn't exist. It didn't even exist as a concept until like the past 50 years in the United States. Yes, okay, I shouldn't say that. More like 100 years, 150. Since the Civil War, they started using it as a racist concept to restrict Chinese immigrants. But it wasn't really immigration. Even Ellis Island, if they didn't let you in, you could just go land somewhere else and come in. They didn't stop you. They didn't hunt you down. It was just a port of entry. And yes, Ellis Island was illegal. The Constitution gave the federal government no authority over immigration. People say, that's ridiculous. How can you say it's illegal? Because the Constitution, because I've read it. And apparently you haven't. Now, if I sound like I'm being snarky, I am a little bit sometimes, but the level of debate impotence in the comments that are against what I'm saying, and this is why I could literally debate anyone on this, and I have no fear of debating anyone, because it's so fundamental and simple, right? We need a homogenous culture or the nation will deteriorate, right? People are truly just repeating what they've been programmed to repeat. These concepts aren't real. These concepts aren't freedom. These concepts aren't Christian. These concepts aren't American. These concepts aren't lawful. The law says you can't stop anyone unless you have a warrant or probable cause that they've committed a crime. The government has no right to make travel a crime, to make immigration a crime. This is the law. And if you do accuse them of a crime, you have to give them a trial by jury. It's literally that simple. And so what do people say? Instead of having to deal with their cognitive dissonance that would make them challenge their hate, what do they say? If you don't have immigration controls, you don't have a country. You don't have a border. If you don't have a homogenous culture, your nation deteriorates. The nation is deteriorated because of stupid ass people like we see repeating this crap who do not have the courage, the fortitude, or the brain cells to literally read a book this big. Or even the Bible, American history, human history, John Locke. There's no sense of willingness to understand. It's no different than a lynch mob saying they're guilty, string them up, we don't need due process because we know. And this is a debate I have with people often. I just had this with a person down here in Mexico recently. Oh, well, this narco obviously is guilty. He should just get the chair. We don't need a trial. I said, you can't think that way. If you think that way, if you give the government and the state power to just decide who's guilty and who's not, it will be your kid in the chair next. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so you notice what they're saying here. Right? Honk says, the lack of comprehension on my part is showing my ignorance. There's absolutely no lack of comprehension here. You notice how everything I'm saying is not being addressed. Every argument I make, they're absolutely incapable. Here's a link to this article. The redcoats we have in here right now, and this is kind of funny, honestly, because I'm literally like saying it and they keep doing it. They're incapable of making an argument because they've never actually studied this. They've never learned civics. They've never learned constitutional law. And I don't mean they have to even spend like 10 years of their life studying it like I have. They've never even stopped to really say, well, what does the law actually say? They're quite literally just repeating what the most corrupt criminals in their country are saying on the TV. That's how dumb they are. And then if I actually call that out, or if you call it out here in the comments, because I'm not catching all of them, it's late. What do they say? You're stupid, you're an idiot. Or if they're being polite, they say things like, oh, well, a nation without borders isn't a country. That's gaslighting too. I never said the nation didn't have a border. A border is just a line that defines your territory. This is our territory. This is the Constitution that governs it, right? It's just talking in circles. But they talk in circles and then act like they've made an argument. What I've done here tonight is make arguments. What I do in my articles is make arguments, but I back those with actual facts. And the people who are always calling me a coward and an idiot, one theme I've noticed more and more, and it's gotten worse over the years, they never make any arguments. There's no coherency. There's no rational thought. They're literally just like robots. If I didn't know better, I'd think they were AI bots, but some of them I know. Some of them are people I know. And it's like their brains have literally been gutted from their head and just replaced with a processor that's connected right to Big Brother. And they literally just repeat whatever they're told. The Immigration Reform Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996 is also void and is not a law. Now, the government with guns can say it's a law, and I understand if you're an immigrant. I'm not saying I'm not blaming an immigrant for wanting to get papers and not have to go through all this, right? And not have to be hunted. Because I'm hearing from people up north right now, right? And I do anything I can to try and, help hide people. I do anything I can to impede ICE within reason, right? I mean, anything that I'm reasonably able to do. And I think everyone should, because they're a terrorist organization and they need to be treated like it. And I'm not saying that violence is what we want, but if everybody just got together, and we're seeing a lot of this kind of pressure in Los Angeles, which usually is very against the Constitution, but in this case, they're very for it. Like when ICE is surrounded and running scared, that's exactly what should be happening. They should be very afraid. They should be literally running for their lives when they try and come into these cities and kidnap people off the streets. And I hope that violence can be avoided, as I always do, because I think we should be peace and patient. And if we push that energy, but stand strong and firm and with courage, that violence can usually be avoided. But if you have 1,000 people surrounding 10 ICE agents, and they all have rocks in their hands, and those ICE agents turn tail and run, the criminals were still the ICE agents. They absolutely deserved it. They are a criminal organization. People were defending the rights. They were defending people from being kidnapped. And I hope the rocks didn't have to be thrown, but they better turn their asses around and get the heck out. And that's how things need to work. People have to stand up. Same as we did at Bundy Ranch. We had a mass of people, right? Doesn't matter. And so like the left says, oh, the Bundys were terrorists. The right says, oh, the people stopping ICE are terrorists. Have we ever stopped to think that maybe neither side is terrorist? Maybe we both have a point and we need to stop fighting against each other and realize that the actual terrorists are the people up here pulling the strings, you guys. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. The one I love right now is that anyone who supports people not being terrorized by ICE believes that pedophilia and sexual relations with minors is a good thing. Even though the guy that they're supporting and the entire administration they're supporting is literally protecting the pedophiles and the people that are having relations with minors. It takes a true profound level of cognitive dissonance for these people, because they're actually accusing everyone else of what they actually support. And it's just wild. It's just absolutely wild to watch. But it's sad because so many people are being hurt by this. And I just hope that all of you, before we wrap up tonight, I hope that all of you that have working brain cells, right? You may not all say it the way I do, but I hope you're not being silent, because your silence is consent. Every time I see a post from ICE or Homeland Security, I may not go into a long post because it's all on the, if people want to argue with me, I just link to the blog post that I spent literally years putting together and collecting information until I finally finished it this year enough that I could put it out. And it's just wild. It's wild to watch. And I hope that if you have the ability to do this, at least leave the comments. Whenever I see a post from ICE and their propaganda, I just say ICE are terrorists. I keep repeating it. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of people just all said ICE are terrorists. See, the words you speak do have power, which is why I think we should be careful with them. Which is why I am not incautious when I look at these people. Because they say I'm labeling him. If you support what's happening, you support the criminals. If you support ICE, if you support Trump, if you support the deportations, who you actually support is the traitors of our country. You're a redcoat. I will happily label you. You're the enemy of freedom. I hope you change someday, because people can change. People can understand how dumb they were and that they were evil. You're supporting the molesters and the abusers and the human traffickers. If you're supporting ICE, you are a human trafficker, because you're actively enabling that process. You might not be directly the one doing the grabbing off the street and the kidnapping of the children and trafficking them, but you're definitely part of it because you're supporting them. And it's wild. And so they're going to try and reverse it on you. They're going to say you're crazy, no matter how reasonable you are. They're going to say you're an idiot, no matter how logically you can debate. And ultimately, it always comes down to this. Ultimately, you're going to be a pedo. This is their ultimate thing. is that you're one of them. Because once they get you to the point that you're a pedo, then they feel like it's okay that you're lynch mobbed. And they say that that's what should be done to me as well, right? And there it is, the wood chipper, right? Ultimately, you will always end up, if you argue with a current United States fascist ignoramus, you will ultimately end up being a pedophile, even though that wasn't the conversation, and you should get and you should get the wood chipper, which of course that concept is also completely the antithesis of law as well. And it's also worth noting on the note of sex crimes and things like that, which are mostly BS in the U.S. They don't even know what a pedophile is. Again, they've never actually read. This is what you got to understand about people like Honk. They've never actually stopped to say, wait, can I back up what I'm saying? And that's the difference between you and I that understand this stuff and the trolls in here. They don't use rational thought. They aren't able to put together a complex idea because they're mentally ill when it comes to this. Now, that may have come over time. Maybe at one point they got it, right? But propaganda is a powerful tool, and it is damaging people's brains. So they're at this point, these people are in a state of cognitive dissonance, of Stockholm syndrome, of like just completely having their brain basically turned to mush by listening to so much trash that played to their hate, that played to their more and more twisted ideas, that now they're the twisted ones. And this is why even in this very chat, they can't even make a coherent response. And so that's just why I love to do this, okay? That's why I love to do this live, because I actually get to talk about what the enemies of freedom will use against you, because that's what they use against me all day. And that's why I wanted to do today's show about comments. I'm going to take out just kind of the middle section where we took the main talk and looked at some of the comments and talked about the concept of this, because no one really wants to watch. But thank you for being here, Honk, because you've really proven my point in every possible way. And some of the other comments here as well, but Honk really did. I mean, you guys might even think that I told him to come, but I didn't. I have no idea who he is. He's another one that won't show his real name. It's great to see what the fascist looks like and understand that you need to be afraid of the fascism, but the fascist can't beat anyone who's using any sort of intellectual process, because these kind of fascists. Now, I'm not saying that there's not the high level Gestapo fascists that actually are intelligent and will try and talk circles and make you feel stupid. But these people never pass the test. That's why they're not actually in the high levels of government. They're not getting paid for this. They're just out trolling for their masters. And they usually only do it on the internet. They can't generally talk to you in person because the statist dicks are so far up their throat that they couldn't actually talk in person. They can only type. And so it's fun to watch. All right, you guys. It was good to have you here. Remember, the government is the human traffickers. The government is creating the war. The government is creating the insecurity and then saying that those poor people over there are making you insecure. We got to punish them. Everything you're being told is a lie. And the whole point of having an understanding of human rights and being reminded in it, not granted, by a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, whether it's in the United States, in Mexico, or anywhere in the world, the point of writing it down is to remind you so that when people try to say, we need to take away the security, we need to take away that thing you liked to protect you, you understand that it's a lie and that they're the criminals. And this, and that basic ability to use common sense and love freedom and have, yes, that state of mind, Eric, is very important. You guys, it's getting late. I'm getting tired. Wow, it's 1:30 in the morning. I just knew I wouldn't have time for this tomorrow because I have too much work to do. And I just wanted to get this out. I will do the clip of this if you want a shareable version of this. This isn't just the long form. I'll do the short, the main topic of this one and post it tomorrow. And I do appreciate you guys sharing it, but I know that most people don't want to hear these things. But someday, if we care enough and keep fighting and keep standing up and keep resisting, maybe it'll come back in style. Because I do see a lot of people getting fed up. And if we could just stop fighting against each other and always saying, like, it's this party that's bad, it's that party bad. I know there's a lot of things that we fight about with left versus right and all this stuff. But ultimately, they're just pitting us against each other. Is there any final questions? I think we've covered this topic. Is there any final non-troll questions? Just about anything. I don't know. Before I wrap up, I'll do 5 more minutes. Okay, I'm gonna stay for 5 more minutes. If any of you guys just want to throw something on another topic in there before we wrap up today, or any other random questions, which I don't promise I'll answer. I'm not obligated to answer like personal questions, but a lot of times I do because it's not a secret. Gaslighting people isn't a cordial conversation. I know that in your world you think that's cordial, but actually you've just been talking in circles and lying through your teeth. So that's not cordial. Everybody knows what that is. But anyway, on another topic, let's not engage the trolls. I don't always block these trolls as long as they're reasonably civil, I guess. But let's ignore Honk and anyone else that's supporting this crap. In uniform commercial code, let's not get into that tonight. I think that's too big of a topic. And I don't usually get too distracted with that stuff, the sovereign citizen stuff or the uniform commercial code or this or that, because human rights are human rights. This is why I always try, it's not that that's always irrelevant, but I always try and explain law in its simplest form and not get off on a conspiracy or a tangent. Or, we talk about, yes, I agree that people shouldn't have to have driver's licenses. And I also don't get angry because we've let the world get to this point that you can't be getting stopped and getting arrested every day, things like that. But everyone has to pick the battle that they want to fight. And it's the most important. But I think in all of that, whatever is the hill that we choose to die on, make sure that the battle that you're always fighting is the one that defends other people. MJM Photography says, how's photography business in Mexico? My photography business is mostly in teaching and in making content because I have a lot of years doing photography. So if you go to simonfx.com, I have a lot of products and I have a YouTube channel for that. I am working on I do work, with collaborations with models and stuff like that, but it's mostly just what I want to shoot and for practice. I'm working on some books of the streets and the culture of Mexico, documenting. I have thousands and thousands of photos from the streets, and more I just get out and do those because I do intend to publish some things. But the photography business, in terms of weddings and portraits, I'm starting to dabble that and promote that a little bit. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is that regardless of what trade you're in, when you come to a new country that's so very different, the culture difference, it's like, I'm a great wedding photographer and I can do weddings, but to adapt to that, first I need to know the language, which I do now. But it's not just knowing the language, you need to learn how to connect with people on what they're looking for. And so I do quite a bit of things down here. I work with a cafe in terms of their management and marketing and imaging and things like that, a European style cafe. And so I engage with people on that level, but honestly, while there is a lot of potential, I would say that hiring photographers is actually more of a real job, same as being a musician. Like in the States, if you don't make it big in the States as a musician, you're just poor all the time. But there's countless musicians down here that just work parties and things like that because the culture values the arts more. And so people, I think, tend to have more potential in making money. All right. Is dying on a hill better than suicide? Sometimes I think there's no difference. But then again, I think if the hill you're dying on, I think the hill you're dying on should be defending the rights of another, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that all these other conversations we have aren't relevant, but I think that if you die on a hill, it should be loving your neighbor and defending someone else. I think that's the essence of Christianity, not all religious hype. and control that we try and make about it. And you guys can always email me from my website, yeah. And then what else? I think that's all. I'm tired. Just looking over comments. You can tell I'm slowing down though. Time to wind it down. And you have to, yeah, the patriot movement that I was oftentimes at the head of in, the 2012, 13, 14, 15. One of the people, not like the head, but like I was a leader in that movement. And in terms of my activism, like the concept of what is now called auditors is based on what I did as an activist, which is in a way inspiring, but are we changing anything, right? Or are we just making content? Because I didn't go out specifically saying, no, I'm going to get content today. It wasn't a living for me. It actually made it difficult for me to make a living because it took so much of my energy. But I was just doing it because I would get this feeling here of like, no, we got to stand up to this. But actually it's interesting because now I see they don't call themselves auditors down here, but I see these activist lawyers and even activist politicians in states like Michoacan and stuff in particular. I show them here on the channel sometimes, and they're using it. One thing that encouraged me, and they don't know me, they don't probably even know where it came from, but they're using the style that of interacting with police that I was one of the primary people that promoted that style now 8-10 years ago. And so it's getting down here as well, which I think is encouraging. And I know it's there's a lot of people doing that now. So I'm not saying that they've watched my videos necessarily, but a lot of the activists in the US that are dealing with police and stuff and that are doing that camera work, I am a little proud that I kind of founded that style of like, you talk to the camera, you take charge of the situation, and that's how you do activism. Not that I'm the first one ever to do it. So yeah. Let's see here. Yes, the militia is the people. But again, the patriots weren't really patriots. They believed in patriotism for themselves, and the leftists needed to go to prison. And this is what I could see the threads of that from a lot of people, and I would always oppose it. This is the problem of people, a lot of the liberty-leading politicians from like Washington State. They would never actually take that on. They would just let the riffraff and the fascism undertones of we're better than them, we should hunt them down. They would let that go and just kind of keep on their motivational message. And the reason that I lost popularity is because I didn't let it go. I would say, no, I'm for your gun rights, let's march. No, I'm for your land rights, let's march. Oh, the immigrants, no, that's not okay. We can't treat them that way. Let's march. Let's stand up. Oh no, you can't do that. We hate the immigrants, right? You can't come against our racism. You can't come against our egoism. So what happened was, and those of you that have followed me for a long time know this, when I came out boldly against the police and said, you know what, I've been looking for years, there's no good cops. They're all the enemies of the Constitution. They all choose to be criminals. The ones that want to be good either turn bad or leave or are thrown out. That's a fact, right? And so when I said that, all these flag wavers were like, oh, how dare you turn against the police? They're our heroes. And I'm like, no, that's not patriotism. That's statism. And so when I started calling them out, and not wanting to be part of any faction and say, no, I'm for the gun rights, I'm for the right to speech, I'm for our right to protest, I'm for our land rights and our rancher rights and all that good stuff. I'm also for the immigrants' rights and I'm for the native rights. And then they're like, whoa, what are you doing over there? No, come back over here. You just need to stay on point. I'm like, no, my point was always liberty. My point was always justice. They were never really patriots. They never really supported. These very same people are literally screaming now to violate the constitutional rights of poor, hardworking families in the name of them being criminals, even though they've committed no crime, had no due process, and no trial, and cheering as everything they've ever worked for is taken away. That's not patriotism. That's Nazism. That's fascism. And if you're doing that, if you're participating in that, you're psychotic. You're really sick in the head if you think that's okay. And that's why I keep coming back here. I keep coming back here. I keep coming back here. And I know sometimes I sound like a broken record, but we need to, and you need to, and you guys need to. If you don't like the way I'm saying it, go say it better. If you want to debate with me on it and you think you've got a better argument, make a video. See if anybody will listen. But do something. Do something. So yeah. And how's Mexico? Dirk says Mexico is corrupt too. But Mexico has more individual freedom. They don't worship the police to nearly the same degree. Mexico has a mostly open border. Sure, we're starting to see, the U.S. abuses the Mexicans so much that then they get resentful. And so that's going to affect things too. Mexico's worse than when I got here. Ever since COVID, they use COVID too to take power and control, right? The pre-2020 Mexico was much more chill, but the violence hasn't gotten better because the U.S. in collusion with the politicians here, who are the actual criminals, they make sure the violence stays up. Government doesn't want to solve the violence. Violence is what keeps you afraid, and fear is what keeps you obedient. It's a very powerful tool for them. It's a very powerful tool. And this is what every country is doing now, because you got to understand, like, cultures are different, but governments are all sleeping in the same bed, right? That might play to their culture, but most of the governments around the world are all talking to each other and sharing their propaganda ideas and their techniques to control and manipulate so that they can get richer and you can get poorer. And speaking of Mexico, yes, while there are immigration laws and there's an immigration office, and sometimes people get deported. It happens, but it's not like that. I've been to the immigration office before. I didn't pay a dime to get papers in Mexico. Generally, you do. I mean, governments are all about money, but I presented the facts, and I'm an officially recognized refugee of the United States by the federal government of Mexico. And then people think like, oh, Gavin just bootlegs from Mexico. No, the government here is totally corrupt too. The police are goons, but they're not goons hopped up on steroids most of the time. They're just cowardly goons that want to extort you, and usually they don't even want to write a ticket. They just want to get some money out of you. But I've always just stood up for myself. I've never given a bribe. I've been pushed around a little bit here and there. And I've never even given my license to a police officer, much less proven myself. The National Guard actually once asked me for my documents because I was filming them and annoying them. And I literally, in Spanish, in my poor Spanish, but I just told them, And so yes, the one time that I've been asked for my papers, immigration papers, it wasn't even very official, but I just said no and I walked away and I refused. Now that's not to say that people like from Guatemala, that the immigration officials don't get on the buses and harass them, but you see these big marches through Mexico of immigrants, right? They're just ignoring the immigration and they don't touch them. So when they go in groups, they mostly get left alone, but thugs are thugs, right? Uniformed officials are usually thugs enforcing illegal rules because the Constitution of Mexico, which I study as well, also protects these same rights that I'm talking about. And these things they try and do down here are illegal as well. And there is an overarching concept that should be considered in all of this. I come back to constitutions because if you have the highest codified law of a country and you understand it, it's useful. And so I talk about those a lot. But if a constitution violates people's basic rights, it's not law either. And this is what people truly don't understand. Usually you can argue the Constitution in most countries and be like, no, these are our rights, because most countries that are even moderately sane have a Bill of Rights, right? But there's no real baseline that says, oh, if it's not in the Constitution, it's not a law. That's not true at all. In fact, the US Constitution says the opposite. It says, just because it's not in here doesn't mean it's not a right and that the people don't have it, right? So there you're back to Ninth Amendment. Constitutions don't give you rights. And if a constitution is rewritten, because they commonly are, and Mexico has a much larger federal constitution because the US Constitution is very hard to change, so they simply ignore it. They try that here as well, but I do think in court the Constitution is actually more valid here. So what they do here is they try and change the Constitution more often. And it's important to understand that if a constitution violates people's rights, it is now lawless as well, or that part of it rather, because the law is not the Constitution. The law is life, liberty, and property. The law is what I talked about on the speaking tour in 2016 when I was out defending the Hammonds and the Bundys and the people that have been arrested from Bundy Ranch. The law is not what government says. The law is what we have naturally. And if you don't understand that concept, go read like a basic law theology book that the Constitution was founded on, like John Locke's The Law, something like that. No, it's John Locke's Second Treatise of Government. You can go back to the law and things like that as well. But Locke's Second Treatise of Government has some really basics. And yeah, they apply to everyone equally. This whole idea of like they're a citizen, they're not, it's different. No, that's absolute nonsense. That was never real, nor is it in the Constitution. It's not part of the law. And so when you have people saying that, you'd be like, what are you just talking out of your ass? Because that's not in the Constitution and it's not in our history. There were no citizens when they drafted the Constitution. People are just repeating, like we've seen in here tonight, people are just repeating the propaganda nonsense that they've been told to repeat. All right, you guys, I'm going to go. It's late, but it was great having you here. And I even enjoyed, seeing, because our topic was irrational comments and the inability to debate, I actually valued the trolls in here that were doing just that. And I hope that someday they'll get smarter. But it was still fun to have them here. So yes, and that's correct. You have rights. That's correct. And their borders aren't to protect your national sovereignty. Their borders are to make them rich and to make you a slave. A border is simply a geographic region that you say, hey, this is our people, this is our culture, and here's our constitution, for example. And you can't invade us. You can't come conquer us, right? They have nothing to do with restricting immigration. They never did. That's an invented, imaginary concept. And I hope you guys will put this to work in going out there this week and just watching the unmitigated tyranny and fascism that is now promoted as sanity. All right, you guys, peace. See you next time.